Welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast. This is Eric Geiger, Senior Pastor of Mariners Church, and I am so honored today that we have Steve Graves on the podcast. Now, Steve Graves, to me, is like a big deal. And if you know his name, you know he's a big deal. He's written a bunch of books. He's a consultant. He runs a large organization. But personally, he was a massive influence in my life. For 7 years, I met with him once a month, almost half a day each time. So we spent a lot of time together. So if people in our church don't like me, they can blame you. They can blame you because you were a part of forming me. I have so many things that I remember you telling me. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of my bosses, one of our elders, and I was just... It was like a self-reflection moment. And I said, I had an executive coach once named Steve Graves, and he told me, Eric, you have to realize that whenever you give constructive feedback to someone, if you are frustrated because of your position, if you share it in your head at a level 2, it's going to be felt by the person receiving at a level 8. And so just realize when you share something that can be perceived as negative, it's going to be heard with even louder force by the person you're sharing it with. And then the flip side, which was totally discouraging, but it's true, that the positive traits that you have, they get muted downward in the organization, and the negative feelings you express, they get amplified more loudly. The reason I thought was always helpful for me is it caused me to want, I always want to be led by the Spirit of God, but to realize that my words carry weight as a leader, and I don't want to crush anybody. I want to encourage people, and then I'd have to work really hard at amplifying the great values. Anyway, that was one of them. I got so many Steve Gravisms that I learned from you over the years, and I don't know if many people know this, but I probably would not have become the vice president and senior vice president at Lifeway Christian Resources without you, because I was an outside hire, really young. The CEO, Tom Rayner, who you and I both love, he's a mentor of mine. What Brad Wagner, who is essentially the COO of the company, told me is that in an all-day, and this is relevant to what we're talking about today, like a change-orientated meeting, you said, hey, what's the profile of a change-oriented leader that you should bring in from the outside? And you kind of nudged, you didn't even know me, but you kind of nudged them towards making the. Am I telling the story correctly?
I think you are. It was pretty easy, Eric. You fit the profile perfectly. So yeah. But it was really fun when you talk about those years we got to spend together. That was a ton of fun because, you were in a, you were situated and poised in a hyper growth organization that to our topic today, that had a tremendous amount of change elements and issues to navigate. And, with your wiring and your background, you just had to apply some learnings and some instincts and some intelligence to a different address, a different format, a different, geographical place. But you still had a lot of that already in you. So it was pretty easy to simply extend that to where the Lifeway world was in my mind. It was an easy, safe bet on my part.
Well, you're being kind, because I think it was like a year after you were coaching me when I actually started to settle into my role, and my bosses were comfortable with me, that they admitted that when they first assigned you to work with me, that you essentially were my babysitter. That that they were. Here's the reality. I was executive pastor at a church in Miami at the time. The church had grown a bunch from like 1,000 to 8,000 people, but our budget was like, $10 million, $12 million. All of a sudden, I'm responsible to turn around a division that had declined from 185 million in revenue to 155 million in revenue, and it was a turnaround. And you were one of those people who declared it as such to the organization, which did give me a lot of runway to come in and make changes, which was really difficult and challenging because it meant changing organizational structures, which meant people departing the organization. But it was a lot bigger of way more employees, way more stewardship responsibilities. I was really young for the role, and so I think he might have been my certified babysitter. Like, be sure he doesn't he doesn't mess things up.
Yeah, yeah. Make sure he's in by 10. Make sure he doesn't,
Yeah.
make sure he puts the keys back for the car when he gets out of it, turn the
But
lights
one
off.
of the things, here's another Steve Gravism that you told me during that time. And this is related to change. I remember, I'm hoping you'll remember this too. I was wrestling with the speed of change, and like I know we have these are things we must do. We have to make these changes. And I said, like, how do I know if I'm going too fast for the organization? And you said, in an organization, this isn't true for every organization, but in a historic organization that is very process heavy, the organization will tell you, like you will have a hard time going too fast in a process oriented organization. So don't let speed concern you. Trust me, there'll be processes that will get in your way. Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Oh yeah, totally, totally. Yeah. You process organizations will, I mean, they'll slow you down always.
Yeah.
That's why mature organizations, um, it's just so hard for them to have systemic change quickly. It just takes a long time.
Yeah.
You're just turning the aircraft carrier, as they would say in the illustration. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, great days, and honor that you let me journey with you a little bit back then,
Oh
dude.
man, I loved it so much. All right, so I know so much about you, but can you give everyone who's listening the 60-second bio of
Yeah.
Steve Graves?
Oh wow, yeah, I'd love to. I'm married to my wife Karen, three adult kids, all married. Got six grandkids under four, so I spend a lot of time being a granddad. Pops is my proverbial granddad name, like the rest of the world of dads, I guess. So that's my personal world. Love to fish, love to fly fish. Was on the river yesterday, caught a giant brown trout with my son. Had a great day. In my work world, I'm actually I'm in the 6.0 season of my career trajectory, Eric. I mapped it out a few years ago for a bunch of guys. And I'm in the season of kind of harvest and transition and legacy and transfer, but I'm still very, very active. So my work world looks like this. I've coached CEOs, business owners, and entrepreneurs for 3 or 4 decades. Typically, my portfolio looks like I'll have one or two, maybe three huge global, perhaps public CEOs. I'll have a handful of private, maybe family-held businesses. They could be as small as 3 or 4 million. They could be as large as 10 to 12 billion. And then I'll usually have a handful of eager beaver entrepreneurs trying to scale, exit, merge, whatever, across all industries. I'm not an industry specialist. I'm a leader organization strategy specialist that can be
Yeah.
applied to any organization. And I've worked about in every kind of vertical that I know of. That I mean, like, I've got a CEO of a giant hospital chain. Well, I don't know about healthcare like he does, but he's an expert at that. I just understand the other stuff. So that's kind of part of my world. And then the other part of my world that's become pretty large in the last decade or so is I own a bunch of businesses, partially or majority wise. And one that I'm a part owner in is I'm the acting chairman of a CPG holding company. I live in Northwest Arkansas. Up the street's a company called Walmart that perhaps some people have heard of. And so CPG is just kind of it's just in the air around here. So we have a large holding company that has a bunch of companies underneath it that I'm the acting chairman of. And I get to do that a lot, which is a ton of fun. And then I write a little bit and um and just kind of hang around and enjoy mentoring young guys a little
Yeah.
bit. So that's it.
And your writing, which I always appreciate, even though it's not always like on the Christian living aisle in a bookstore, you do write leadership from a Christian perspective when your faith has really formed your thinking and your life. And I really appreciate that. Your faith comes forth even in your coaching and your humility and you viewing the leader as a servant and change for the sake of blessing the world and blessing people. I know some of the entrepreneurs that you've worked with have been focused on social good and change in the world.
Yeah, well, thanks, Eric. I mean, I've tried probably but my entire adult life has been a little bit of an exploration where I've been trying to figure out what it looks like to really apply a mature, high level integration of faith, of the Bible, of the biblical truth, the repository of everything the Bible has to talk about. How do you really apply that to the real world? At Tuesday at 2:30,
Yeah.
Wednesday 6 o'clock. I mean, like it's a lot of times we Christians have kind of got it. We kind of got it figured out pretty easy of what the Bible has to say to us on Sunday. The question is, how do I really work that into the fiber of my everyday
Yeah.
life, regardless of what I am? And so
Yeah.
that's just been a journey in my own personal world, and I'm still trying to figure it out in a lot of areas.
I love it because I love that I knew that wisdom that I was receiving from you, though was very applicable to the real world, ultimately had its source in fearing the Lord and walking with Him. So thanks for that, man. Well, you've coached a lot of leaders, as you said, from different organizations and different disciplines. Actually, just for the listener, you may remember several weeks ago we had Cheryl Batchelder, who was the CEO of Popeyes, and when she was transitioning from Popeyes, you spent some time with her coaching her.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have that in common with Cheryl. We
There
both.
you go. There you
It only
go.
took one session with her, though. It took 7 years with me. I mean,
Well, you were on the slow train.
yeah, I'm slow track, slow track. But change is what we talked about this week, and as we're looking at Nehemiah, and I mean, so much has been written about Nehemiah's leadership when it comes to he took a group of people who didn't believe the wall could be done, could be rebuilt, and in 52 days the law is rebuilt. But it's more than just a rebuilt wall. The people had been in disgrace, and now they're filled with joy. The people were completely dishonoring God's commands. Now they're making this public commitment that they're going to keep His commands. The city had not been populated. Now people are moving back to the city. And so the change was bigger than just the wall. It was transformation about even how they believed about themselves. It was transformation in their behavior. It's easier to build a wall than it is to change a culture.
Yeah.
And he changed even though he didn't use the word culture, and I think I agree with Edward Schein, the guy who's kind of known as the culture goat, had wrote about organizational culture. He says that word's overused. He basically says, use it one time to define what you're talking about, then never use it again, because it's like a junk drawer term.
Right. Right.
But I think people who looked at what Nehemiah accomplished would say it was cultural transformation. But transformation's about change, and some say leadership's often about change. You've coached for multiple decades. Has coaching about change been a consistent need? And is it always an important aspect of leadership? Is leading
Yeah.
change always important?
Yeah, Eric. I mean, no doubt. There's no question. Change is just kind of part of um, it's just part of the basic rudimentary foundation of any conversation about leadership and or development. I mean, think about this. We're living in a cycle right now that the idea of spiritual formation is on a real uptick, which is good. I love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Sometimes different themes will kind of capture the Christian world for a few years or a decade or whatever. Well, spiritual formation is just huge right now, and I'm glad it is. Okay. I mean, there's a basic assumption at the bottom of spiritual formation, which is I'm going to become something more or
Yes.
different tomorrow than I have been
Yep.
yesterday. And so I mean, if we could say I'm going to become a better version of myself, it can say I'm going to improve and grow from some character weaknesses and traits to some areas of strength. It can say that I'm going to pick up some skills and behaviors and attitudes that right now my skill and my aptitude with delegation is a 3. In order for me to really do this job at the next level, I've got to be a 6. And so there's embedded in the concept of both the leader and the organization the concept of change. I mean, change is kind of like it's just kind of like 101 of life and leadership in any kind of organization. And it doesn't matter if you're leading, a really
Yeah.
small nonprofit, a big organization, doesn't matter. Change is embedded in the life of the leader and in the life cycle of every organization.
Yeah. So, have you found in leaders that you coach that there's a difference in appetite for change? And
Oh yeah,
how do you
absolutely.
how do you assess the appetite of a leader? Like if you're meeting with someone for the first time, and I know there's people in our church who, man, they'd be honored to be coached by you. Obviously, you can't coach everybody. I know you have a coaching practice, but if you were going to try to help someone assess their appetite for change and then how to grow in their appetite, because they have to have some appetite for change if they're going to be a leader, because at some point they're going to be leading some type of change initiative.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a series of questions that I always ask people prior to ever engaging with them or ever agreeing to work with somebody that allows me to find out what do I think about their self-awareness? What do I think about their aptitude for actual change, formation, growth, development, whichever word is the right word for them. Because it doesn't help me. I'm not going to work with somebody who has no appetite for change. If they
Got it.
don't, if they want to stay being the same person they've always been, just because their board thinks they need to change doesn't mean that they think they need to change. But if somebody has an appetite for change, that's different. Now, some people are wired. Some people are just more risk averse. Some people love risk. Some people love to latch on to every new idea. Some
Yeah.
people want to hold on to old ideas longer than they should. But the idea of should I change, it's embedded in the life of every leader. But to take it even another layer down or above, depends on which way we want to think about it, is the gospel. I mean, I remember a few years ago, Eric, I wrote a little article during the Christmas holidays on the gospel of change. And I used Mary, Joseph, and Herod as my kind of my archetype models. And I said Mary was the example of the early adapter. Joseph was the example of the hard sell, and Herod was the example of the resistor, the deceiver resistor. You
Yeah.
know,
Are you thinking?
so
Are you kind of referring to that fusion, like when an idea goes through that bell
yep,
curve?
yep,
Yeah.
yep, exactly,
You
exactly.
got the innovators, the early
Yep,
adopters,
you
the
got
late
it. You got
adopters.
it.
Yeah.
You got it. And so, Mary took her a minute, but she eventually, I'm in. Well, Joseph had to have a little more
Yeah.
information, had to have a few angels visit him at night, had to have some inspiration, but he eventually got on board, but he was a hard sell. Okay. Well, Herod looked like he was on board, but he was nothing but a very deceptive face of resistance. And so leaders have got to be able to know what resistance looks like. Sometimes the biggest resistors in an organization are people that are smiling at you, shaking their head, yes, and up and down.
That's the
But
worst kind, though.
yeah, it is because
I much prefer someone who just is going to own that they aren't for it.
yeah, totally, totally, absolutely, because you know what you're dealing with there, and
Yeah.
you then know what you've got to do to actually perhaps sell them or get them on board. But to your point, the gospel assumes there's change taking place. It has to. I mean, it assumes
Yeah.
I can become different than I was 2 years ago. So many times we just become an older version of ourselves, the same person we've always been. We just age our way out. But like I've always been I've always been an exaggerated, impatient person. Always. But I've never gone beyond that.
Yeah.
I've always become angry based or fear based or too competitive or
Right.
whatever.
We don't want that.
No, the gospel assumes I'm growing and changing.
Yes.
So change is
That's great.
embedded in the idea of the gospel and the idea of
Yeah.
life and leadership.
So, I mean, in reality, you have two high level leaders in an organization. One's a believer and one's not a believer. The one who should have an instinct towards change, the Christian actually has a bit of an unfair advantage here because the Christian has been changed and is being changed, has
Absolutely.
been changed by the grace of Jesus and is being sanctified.
Absolutely.
So us Christian leaders, if anyone could be great at change, it should be us because we should be people who understand
Ex-
change.
Exactly, Eric. I mean, and now here's the problem. The problem is when and why does it break down? But the truth is that's absolutely correct. We Christians ought to have an inside bent and instinct toward changing,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily, but we should because that's the basis of spiritual formation.
Yep. Let's talk about how challenging it is to implement change, and even with it start with the leaders embracing of the pain that's going to come. we implement change, and Nehemiah did because he really believed that it was best for the people he was serving. He wasn't trying to hurt people with the change that he was implementing.
Right.
And all the leaders I know, I mean, even on our imperfect days, we want to help people. We want to serve people. But sometimes there's pain that comes along with change. Here's another Steve Graves memory. I shared with you when I was wrestling with coming to Mariners as senior pastor. And though I had not yet been offered the CEO job at Lifeway, I think every reasonable observer at that point would have said it looked likely that I was probably gonna be offered that role, right?
Absolutely. I happen to know that was true.
Yeah, I mean that was the trajectory.
Yes. Yes.
And I really sensed God leading me here. And I remember you weren't trying to talk me out of it. You were always super encouraging, but yeah, I know. I mean, it was, and Dr. Rayner and I have talked about this because I love him so much and never wanted to hurt him. And I felt badly that I had disappointed him because it looked like I was going to be his successor. But anyway, you said to me, Eric, are you okay not going and being a change leader? Because multiple times in my tenure at Lifeway, when I first went there, we had to change the direct to organization or the business, and then I was responsible for all of publishing, so I had to merge two divisions, and then some of the sales functions came over as well to our area of stewardship, and so there was several seasons of change. And I remember you saying, because you said some leaders, there's a debate among theorists that some believe someone can be a change leader and not a change leader, and others believe, no, a change leader is just a change leader.
Right.
Like there's specialists in turnarounds. Like they literally go into an organization, they turn around, and they go to another organization. And I remember you asking me, are you okay going to Mariners and not being a change leader? And I remember telling you, Steve, you think I liked all of this? I mean, I remember that the first season of implementing change, Kay had me sleep on the couch, not because she didn't love me, but because I couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember changing the organization that required some offboarding, deletions of positions, and so we could reinvest dollars in product innovation and launching some new resources. Man, that was not fun. Even though I knew it was best, it was not fun.
Yeah.
And so even though I saw the fruit of the change, man, it is not like signing up to implement change. You are signing up for some pain.
Yeah.
How do you help leaders get ready for that grind?
Well, it's really interesting because, there's change. We often think the word change simply is referring to changing from bad to good, something that's wrong to right.
Okay.
All growth, if you take any company that's in an innovation growth cycle where they're jumping the S curve with new things, it's maybe not bad to good. It might be good to better or good to another good or good to a modern good or something like that. And so it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I've said for years, which I believe so strongly, is that it takes some combination of two things to drive change. It takes some combination of weight and urgency. If you don't have weight and urgency, generally you have to manufacture something that will create the catalyzing elements that drive change. That's the reason why vision is so important because
Okay, when you say weight, do you mean
weight,
WE?
yes, weight as in heaviness. Like
Got it.
Nehemiah had weight, he had burden.
Yeah.
He was just weighted down with
Yes.
somebody. Will somebody not go fix this problem? Just on and on. And you
Yeah.
roll.
So you're saying there's some factor of both of those that then give the impetus to we are changing.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, everybody, I'm knocking out cookies every night and drinking Dr. Peppers, and all of a sudden, I have a heart attack, or I have a stroke, or something happens. Weight and urgency is going to catalyze me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of my marriage and everything I think is great. My wife walks in one day and she says, "Hey, we're really tired of you traveling Mondays to Fridays for the last 5 years. If that's going to be the next 5 years, I think we're going to go a different direction." And it's like, what are you talking about? And so weight and urgency, they inject change like a steroid into
Okay.
a person's life or an organization's life. Now,
Yeah.
if you don't have that, it doesn't mean you still can't change, and it doesn't mean you don't need to change. But if you have that, and at Lifeway, without going too deep, Lifeway had some weight and urgency,
Yeah.
and it had to face some stuff
Yes.
relative to its customers and its offering and
Yep.
stuff, you know. Well, so when you have that, a little bit of it is finding the individual or the leader that can ride on that big wave. Well, another change leader is the person that doesn't have that weight and urgency, but they know down deep that the opportunity of the market is to, is there's a need to create something. So that's when, and Nehemiah actually combined both of these pieces.
Got it.
That's the reason when you bring a vision in, a vision, and you've heard this a lot of times, people will give to a tip. Okay. But they really, really give big money to vision.
Yeah.
So if I come in and I give you a need, I said it wrong, my bad. They'll tip to a need, they'll give to a
Yes.
vision. That's the
Yep.
statement, my bad. And so if I show you a need, I might give you a few dollars, but you show me a vision,
Yeah.
man, I'm in. I'm rolling out my time and my money. And so it takes weight and urgency if I'm just going to ride the natural trajectory of what's happening. If
Yeah.
you don't have weight and urgency, then you have to figure out how you're going to move people because otherwise they're just going to keep doing the same
Yeah.
thing they've always done.
So, in all your coaching of leaders, is it the rare leader? Is it the exceptional leader? Is it just a certain wiring that sees the weight and urgency before others do? Or is it actually wise to wait a bit where the weight and urgency is so, but then, on that whole S-curve model, at some point, if you wait too long, it's so much harder to implement change.
Yeah.
What's the intuition of being a leader who finds the weight and the urgency early?
Yeah. No, not every person is wired to spot weight and urgency. That said, if you wait long enough, it shows itself there.
Yep.
I mean, I remember I had a project with a nonprofit, a global nonprofit a few years ago. Let's call them a 40, 50, $60 million nonprofit, and they wanted to change to become more relevant. The problem is they had no money problems. They had more money in the bank than they could spend.
Yep.
They had really nice brand on the street, but they felt like that when they looked forward to the next 10 to 20 years, if they didn't reinvent themselves, they were going to become irrelevant for the next generation. Well,
Yeah.
it takes a real leader to convince everybody we have a problem. It's kind of like,
Right.
what are you talking about, dude? Have you looked
Yeah.
at our bank account?
Yeah.
Have you looked at our customer sat scores? They're fantastic. And you say, well, but look around the corner. Think
Right.
with 20 years from now. So that's what takes a different kind of leader
Yeah.
that can create that innovative catalytic thinking around the corner.
Yeah.
But one other quick thing, Eric. Sometimes I've seen leaders, and I can remember many, many times telling a leader who is a real action-oriented overachiever, got to get it done today. That's me. That's who I am. Okay. So
Yeah.
like I'm not the guy that just wants to wait 2 weeks to do something I could do today. Sometimes people like that, they've got to learn how to let stuff cook a little bit. So
Yes.
if you let an organization cook, and if you let weight and urgency, kind of let it show up, now what you've got is you've got some people that are asking questions, and you're not prematurely just trying to
Yeah.
get them to think about things prematurely. They're the ones saying, hey, have you noticed our budget this last couple of months? I sure have. I wonder what's not working. You got any ideas? I mean, it's
Yeah.
a different animal. So if you've
No,
got
that's good.
real weight and urgency that is showing itself inside your organization or your people
Yeah.
or whatever, that's where a change agent shows up.
See, I think change and actually leadership as a whole is an art. Max Dupree wrote that book, Leadership is an Art. And I've seen people make mistakes on both sides. So I've seen leaders ignore the weight and the urgency, and then it's so late to try and change because it takes so much. You've gone down on the decline of the S curve so far. You don't have the momentum for change. Like, you waited too late to change. So there's some who don't see the urgency or the weight. And then on the other side, though, like the action-oriented person who's always trying to uncover a problem, if you're not careful, you'll just spin the organization into chaos by servicing dozens of problems as opposed to focused energy.
Yeah, no question. No
You know,
question. Great insight. Great insight. And what you end up doing is you literally can create, compounded problems for the organization that are
right?
not even, and sometimes secondary problems can really derail a trajectory for somebody driving change because you end
Yeah.
up having, you have a something that's not as focused major problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, good insight. Totally
I just
agree.
think people can only absorb, the people you're leading can only absorb so much change. So the thing, you want to be sure you're focused on the most pressing, and that takes wisdom and art. And that's why, thank God, us Christians have the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I remember reading years ago, I can't remember which book it was, Eric, but John Cotter, uh,
Yes.
the famous man on change, professor, he said people will never change a minute before they're ready. And I was kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
So part of your job is to help create the readiness minute
Yeah.
for an organization or for a person. And when you're doing that through dialogue, vision casting,
Yeah.
decision making, strategic navigation, whatever it is, you're helping create that minute that they're saying, okay, I'm ready. I got it. I'm here.
Great. Well, in Nehemiah, there's this interplay where he's focused on both changing the beliefs of the people. He's reminding them, hey, we are God's people. Hey, we have Jerusalem as an inheritance. Let's move back in. Hey, we should be filled with joy because we belong to him. And then he's also changing their behaviors. Hey, let's sign this commitment that we're gonna obey the Sabbath. We're not gonna intermarry with cultures where little g gods are worshipped. We're gonna give to the temple. So he focuses on both. I find fascinating as I study Nehemiah. He focuses on both behavior and belief. And then when I read a lot about change, there's a debate among theorists on which comes first, behavior or belief. In the book Scaling Up Excellence, the authors say, they kind of expose the debate and say, people debate which one comes first. We don't even have a conclusion. Essentially, they say you have to focus on both. It needs to be this cycle where they feed one another. I'm curious where you land on that debate. Do you, when you're coaching someone, do you say, hey, go after the values, the beliefs in the organization? Do you go after behaviors first? Do you hit from both angles? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah.
Behaviors or belief? They're both important, but which comes first?
Yeah. I probably don't have a strong conviction on which one really is ahead of the other. Kind of the chicken egg thing. I think
Yeah,
my theory and my experience would be whichever one actually tilts you toward progress and movement fastest and first. Like if you happen to be, if you're an academic institution and you're just stilted in theory and information and intellect and belief systems or whatever, what you might want to do with them is say, hey, just take a baby step, would you? Just
yeah,
take
yeah.
take a baby step of action. Let's do something other than
Let's
this.
quit talking about this thing.
Exactly, exactly. Conversely, if you're just one of these, ready, fire, aim, or whatever, if you're one of those people that just sometimes you might want to say, hey, let's slow it down just a little bit and let's reinforce our belief system. Years ago, I created a construct, Eric, when I was helping some CEOs trying to actually change their behavior. And I might have talked about this one time. But I remember I created a little three-step sequential thing that basically, in order for somebody that needs to change, let's suppose that you're the person that every year you go on a vacation with your family, but you take your phones, your work, you're always working the whole time, you're never really there with them in the moment. And finally your family says, hey, why don't you just stay home this next family vacation? You'll say, what are you talking about? I was with you all the whole time. And they'll say, no. Well, in order for you to change your behavior, if you've got a real behavior item that needs to be changed, you've got to do a couple of two or three things. You got to start off by deconstructing any kind of appetite system that has supported your wrong behavior.
Hmm.
So if you think I can't be away for 2 weeks or I can't be away for a week, there's no way the organization can
Yeah.
function without me. I'm so indispensable to everything going on. Like, and so I've got to deconstruct and then reconstruct some right belief systems to your
Yeah. No,
behavior.
that's good. That's
If
good.
my belief systems are, if my belief systems have been, if they've been poisoned with bad box thinking, I've got to deconstruct and reconstruct. So that's one. The second is I've got to adopt some structures that will actually give me a chance to win. That's the reason why, I mean, most people who exercise a lot join a gym. They join Peloton. They have
Right.
a trainer. They have,
Yep.
not saying you got to, but more do than
No,
don't.
that structure totally helps you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Most people that love to read, they read hardback books, they read the Kindle, they set up structures, okay. And then the last is just take a baby step, man. Just take a baby step. Don't and
Yeah.
super achievers, like they'll go from saying, well, I've never exercised, I've never been on a diet. I think I'm going to run 3 marathons next month. And you want to say, hey, partner,
Yeah.
ease up. Why don't you just
Yeah.
try to get out and walk a mile twice
Right.
this week?
Totally.
Let's see if we can check off this week walking 1 mile
Yeah. It's
by
good.
Sunday. Just take a baby step. So in my model, you gotta have a little bit of both, but I
When you
will.
draw that up, is it a diamond? Is it a
Yeah,
triangle?
yeah,
How do you do it?
it's a diamond. It's a diamond. I mean, literally those three things. And so then the question becomes, which one do you start with? It's
Yeah.
whichever one is going to give you the impetus to
Ah.
actually put a foot forward. If
Yeah.
you if one of these gives you a chance to take a step forward,
Yeah.
do it.
Well, that's fascinating because if you're saying choose either steps or beliefs, then your structure that your tool that your framework that you have developed is saying, hey, they both are important, whichever one you want to go with.
Yeah,
If you had done it like a triangle and beliefs was the bottom foundation, and you were always saying start with beliefs, I
yeah,
was going to say, Steve, you're a beliefs guy.
yeah, yeah,
But the fact that you're saying start whichever one works for you shows that
yeah.
you have like a nuanced view of, hey, they're both important, but and attack whichever one you want first, beliefs or
I
behavior.
I had Eric years and years ago. I had a buddy of mine who's a psychologist, psychiatrist, and I remember he said something to me that just stopped me in my tracks. And this is where literally this model kind of it began to develop out of this. I mean, it's been decades ago, but he said, Steve, he said, it takes more than an epiphany to change behavior. And I was like, wow.
Hmm.
And he said, "Now, an epiphany can help. It can
Yeah,
help highlight, but like how many people have, look, I had a heart attack 8 or 9, 10 years.
I remember talking to you right
Yep,
after.
yep, yep. I had a heart attack and I was stunned, Eric. I was
I remember
stunned.
you telling me it felt like an elephant was sitting on
Yeah,
your
it
chest.
was, it
I was like,
was,
man,
it
how do you
was.
even
Yeah,
know?
I know.
I'm like
It
scared. How
was,
do you even know? You're
I
like,
know.
bro, you will know.
I remember us talking about it. You almost had the anxiety attack.
I was like worried. How do like? And you're like,
Yeah.
Eric, trust me, you'll know.
You'll know, you'll know. So I had a heart attack. I had one stent in, and then I got into some cardiac rehab. Okay. The number of people that go to cardiac rehab after heart attacks who don't stop smoking, they
Right.
don't change their diet, they only exercise for 1 week, and then they're back to the same old, same old. It's like it takes more than an epiphany.
It's 90%. It was that Fast Company article called Change or Die
Yes,
that
yes,
became the
yes,
book. I mean,
yes.
it was an
Yeah,
article that became a book called
exactly.
Change or Die.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the data said it's 90%.
Yeah,
This is how hard change is, that 90% of the people who were told by a doctor, listen, if you don't do the big five, where the smoking, the drinking, the eating, the exercise, I don't know what the fifth one is, but if you don't change these things, you will die.
yeah, yeah,
And 90% of them could not change.
yeah, yeah. So
That's how hard change is.
no, it is. No, change is very hard, which is why I really do believe if you have some combination of weight and urgency that is showing up inside you as a person or your personal life or your organization's life, your chances of change kind of go up a little bit because you have some catalyzers, you have
Yeah.
some drivers. But guess what? It won't change by itself. That's introduction, the leader. Nehemiah. I mean, like it wasn't like Nehemiah fabricated a problem, and it
Yeah.
wasn't like it wasn't like nobody else woke up and said, "Wow, there's not a wall out there."
Yeah.
But so there's a role for the leader to come alongside this weight and urgency, and then the role of vision. Because if all you do is focus on the problem, it's hard for people to ever. I mean, that's why it's the vision of having a better life after the heart attack or the better life
Mm,
after a problem or
yeah.
a crisis or whatever. That's the vision part.
No, that's good. Well, I mean, all the frameworks you've given me have always been helpful. So I like this belief structure steps. I'm going to be honest with you. If I had to if we were just talking and you said, "Hey, which one are you, beliefs or behavior?" I think it's because I'm a preacher that I'm always going after beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, sure.
I think now I'll use an example. Um, so sometimes I hope people in the church forgive me for this. Sometimes I'm very grateful for all the facilities that we have throughout Southern California. If I like see trash on the ground or like, um, I don't know, like I feel like there should be mulch in that flower bed, or I want our facility. I don't want to worship the facility. I don't want it to adore it, but I want to steward it well. I want to treat it as a gift that it is to serve people in our cities. Um, I can be the guy, if I'm not careful, who just takes a picture of something and text it to somebody. Like, in other words, like, fix this, right? And there's times I do that, but what I really believe is if we have a belief of what hospitality should look like, then I'm not always having to go chase behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
however, I do know that sometimes pointing out a behavior can then surface a conversation about beliefs.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And if you pushed me and you just said, look, you must choose one. You
Yeah,
cannot say both. I would choose beliefs as well
yeah,
because that's go back to the gospel. The gospel begins with me changing a belief posture. It changes me saying, I can save myself. I'm enough for the redemptive story, me and my own grit, me and my own
yeah.
intelligence, my background, my name, whatever, versus no, I need a savior. I need a redemptive
Amen.
alternative that I can never come up with myself.
Yeah,
So it's a belief system. Now, before we go too quickly, though, James is going to be screaming,
that's right.
you better get to doing
No,
part.
you're right.
You
You're
better
right.
you better get on
Yeah,
the
that's
action.
a great point. Like even in the scripture, we see a grace, but we also see that it works its way out.
Yep.
And then if the works aren't there, then you can go back to the belief on have you failed to understand grace.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
Man, I knew this conversation would flow so easily. I just got one more question. What are the most common mistakes that you see leaders make related to change? And that, like, you surface them and give like the solution. Like, here's the mistake. Here's what you do instead.
Yeah. Eric, I'm not good at those kind of questions. I'll try to give you a few.
Well, let me ask you. Give me a question you're good at. Give me the softball question to ask
I've
you.
seen I've seen it varies so much
Yeah,
depending on the person, the situation that's needed, what the
yeah,
change is all about, all that kind of stuff. But I will say this. Often a lot of times, um, sometimes some leaders um, sometimes we can become a little too short sighted or we can become a little too truncated. Better example might be our ceiling and our blue sky drops too low when we think about change, and we don't really unleash the power of what the gospel's intent really is
yeah.
for transforming the world we live in, whether
Cool.
it's a cultural deal or whatever. And so sometimes sometimes leaders we can dumb down change to
Like
make
too small of a vision. We have too small of a vision.
yes, better way of saying it. Perfect. We literally can have a too small of a vision for what the change can actually be.
That's
And if
good.
you look at our culture and our world, we've been catapulted forward by people who were able to really embrace big change vision trajectories. And so that might be one of them. Another thing that I think I've seen sometimes is, change usually requires some internal work by me. Like very few leaders, if they're involved in a change, like go back to your days at Lifeway.
No, you're right. It did. It's sanctifying.
It is.
To lead change.
It is.
It, it,
It
it
is.
it's a
It is.
spiritual growth process, but it's
It
it's a
is.
trial.
It is, Eric. And so what happens a lot of times we can become almost clinical and we don't necessarily embrace what I can learn,
Mm,
what's the personal stuff I can learn,
yeah, that's
develop
good.
and grow with me while I'm in the middle of this change. And I've still got to drive it, but like I'm convinced that when you look at Nehemiah, I'm convinced that Nehemiah was going through a lot of personal internal, if we were just
Oh
were
gosh.
mapping out his own personal life of change internal,
Yes,
he was doing this up and to the right, big time.
totally. Man, this has been so helpful. I'm so grateful for you, man. I love you so much. Thanks for the impact that you've made in my life, and if there's everything I can do for you, I'm a call away, man. You mean a lot
You're
to me.
too fun. You're too fun. I'm honored to be a person who just got to journey with you a little bit in the back seat, dude. And I love what you're doing. Love the work that you guys are doing out there, and couldn't be a bigger fan.
Man, if you're ever in Southern California, come say hi.
I need to. I need to come out
Yes.
way. Good seeing you.
Man, thanks for joining us, everybody, for the If I Had More Time podcast.
All right.